to discuss, really trying to understand from our perspective what went on in Israel with the election and where the Israeli electorate is at this moment in time. But before we get there, we really want to ask this question based on really what the two of you are doing on a day-to-day basis in 2022, 2023. What does the Jewish Agency do, and what do you do for the Jewish Agency here in North America?
You want to begin, sir?
I will start. I'm based in Toronto in Canada. I'm the director for the Jewish Agency for Canada. I'm based in Toronto for the last year. And we are trying to promote programs that bring people with other people, Israelis and Canadians. Mainly, we target the young generation. Different programs taking place either in Israel or in Canada or in other parts of the world, that because we believe that the way to strengthen the Jewish identity, the connection to Israel and Zionism should be by Canadians meeting Israelis in their age, with sharing their interests. Because we know that grandparents who are diaspora, Holocaust survivors who moved to the diaspora didn't need all these programs. The bond to Israel was quite part of essential in their lives, and also their children. When it comes to the grandchildren, who are now at the ages of, I would say, 15 to 30, the connection to Israel and the Jewish identity is not so clear as it was 30 or 50 years ago. So here comes the Jewish Agency, which was born almost 100 years ago as an important part of the Jewish people on the way to have the Jewish state, the state of Israel, which is the center of the Jewish world right now. And nowadays, we are not promoting only Aliyah, immigration to Israel, which is also important. Every Jew who would like to move to Israel get this Israeli citizenship. But we try to promote informal education by different emissaries in communities, small, large communities in Canada, and also to bring young Canadians to stay in Israel from 1 week to 1 year. All programs are sponsored. And we believe that once people get to know each other and networking is on progress, it helps to strengthen the Jewish identity and the connection to Zionism and Israel. So that's mainly what we do.
That's mainly the mission of the Jewish Agency. I am based in LA, and my region is the western region of the United States. I'm in charge of 16 states. It's Alaska and Hawaii as well. And I go as far east as Memphis. Actually, that's my region. So as you know, it's very West Coast. On our daily work, we oversee many different different fields of the daily work of the Jewish Agency. We, of course, oversee the activity of our shlichim, of our emissaries, just like us, who are sent from Israel to communities here in the United States. And it can go from very large communities to very small communities. Depends on what the community needs and what it wants in order to create all that Yaron was describing, mainly the connection between the Jewish community, large or small, here in the United States or in Canada, in Yaron's case, with the Jewish people. It can be between two communities here in the United States. It can be between two synagogues, that the only mediator or the way to connect is actually the state of Israel and the Shaliach, or between the United States and Israel, like certain programs that we have, like partnership programs. It can be a community here in the United States and a community in Israel where they have trips that, that involve each other. They go to visit. Each community is visiting the other community here in Israel. And we, of course, deal with Aliyah, like Yaron said, one of the many or famous Aliyah missions in the past year There are actually two, that the Jewish Agency is the main leader in that. One is the Ethiopian Jews, who are still rescuing from Ethiopia. Actually, our CEO is right now over there in Ethiopia, and the other one is the Ukrainian and Russian Jewry, we are actually saving from the war in Ukraine, that are making aliyah now from the war, war-torn Ukraine and Russia, coming to Israel. And this is mainly a Jewish Agency mission.
Should mention that there are 40,000 people already immigrated from Russia and Ukraine to Israel in the last 8 months.
This last 8 months, wow.
40,000. Yeah.
Our expectations for 2022 was about 20,000 before the war broke out. We're looking at 40 now, and we think that by the end of the year we might get to even up to 50. We don't know yet. The numbers change very rapidly. We bring them to Israel. Of course, they make aliyah to Israel. They become citizens in Israel. We house them. We teach them Hebrew. We help them engage with the community. We give them, treatment health-wise. A lot of them come with very poor health. We help their kids. We help them with everything we can in order to incorporate them in the Jewish community and the Israeli community. And we help them through the first year usually, and then set them free in the Israeli community, and of course continue to help them throughout the years. Look, Israel is a society made out of immigrants. Both of us are families. We not too long ago, less than half a century ago. So we are keeping helping and being, as Yaron said, the center for Jewish life right now, which is the state of Israel. And we are representatives, so we are representing the Jewish Agency here in the United States and Canada.
Thank you. That's
what we do in a nutshell. It's really a nutshell.
No, but this is wonderful. And this is actually the perfect intro to our conversation tonight, because now we are going to take our community here and really connect us to what is happening on the ground within the state of Israel. We had this election, we went from Netanyahu to Naftali Bennett, back now to Netanyahu. And so the first question is really, from what we saw from the exit polls, is that the right, it's not even center right? The extreme right, the religious right, really came together as a coalition prior to this election and won a number of seats. And so the question is, based on some of the articles, did the Israeli public swing further to the right, or did Netanyahu do a better job of creating a right coalition prior to the elections? And yet Yair Lapid, did he not do such a great job? Because as we saw from the parties, there were fewer parties on the right and a lot more parties on the left, some of whom were not even able to make it past the threshold to get into the government. So from your perspective, or was it a little bit of both? We'd love to hear from you.
Or exactly all of the above. Well, I would start saying that we should, to understand the Israeli public, we should look back 30 years and see three major, I would say, intersections that moved the public opinion towards the right in Israel. And the bottom line is the Israel public opinion is rightist at the moment. The first crossroad that contributed to this was the failure of the Oslo Agreement back in the 90s, after the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin, which we marked the 27th anniversary just a few days ago. And I was the last one, by the way, to interview Prime Minister Rabin 10 minutes before the assassination at the square. The failure of the Oslo Agreement contributed to a shift that something that is not working. Israel offered peace, signed a peace treaty with the PLO, and as a return got suicide bombers in buses. Then 20 years later, the disengagement from Gaza, initiated by a rightist Prime Minister Sharon from the Likud, under the assumption on the promise that moving out of from Gaza, evacuation of 8,500 settlers and all the soldiers will enhance the security of Israel. And most of the people did support the disengagement at that time. And the answer was rockets and missiles from the terrorist Hamas organization, which targeted civilians. That's why Hamas is a terrorist organization, targeted civilians. So the equation of land for peace totally gone. And the last point, major event was on May 2021, a Guardian of Wall operation, where the Israelis noticed that mixed cities where Jews and Arabs used to live together peacefully, suddenly the Arab neighbors going out to kill their the neighboring Jews. So the change towards the right was completed. Now, why didn't we see it in the previous elections, not in the last one? Because the rift was not right and left. The rift was personal, for Mr. Netanyahu or against Mr. Netanyahu, like pro-Trump, anti-Trump. The US is divided, Trump, anti-Trump, Trump, anti-Trump, the same as Israel, pro-Bibi, against Bibi. Now, some of the rightists have clear rightist ideology, but they're totally against Mr. Netanyahu. They want to see him at home, retired. So they collaborated with the leftists to initiate and form a national unity government that will put Mr. Netanyahu as the leader of the opposition. On these elections, Mr. Netanyahu on the logistics worked much, much better than the other camp. And we know that the question was very personal, pro-Netanyahu against Netanyahu, but under the surface, there was something else. Not only the personal, because the media did a very shallow, non-professional work, and I came from the media. Non-professional work and very shallow. Pro-Netanyahu against Netanyahu, that's the whole story. Nobody cared about what's going to happen with Iran, what's the relationship with the Palestinian Authority, how will Israel go on the next pandemic, and who solved the cost of the high cost of living or the traffic jams. Nobody cared about that, and nobody talked about that. It was off the campaign, because minor questions like the cost of living is, who cares? Now, the question was very personal, but under the surface, there was a very interesting way which Netanyahu knew how to exploit. His narrative was, we should promote the Jewish values in the Jewish state. We are the center of the Jewish world. It's important that Israel will be strong. It makes the Jewish world stronger. But when it comes to the question of Jewish values versus other values like liberalism, the Jewish values should be first. Law and order versus Jewish values should be first. Universalism versus Jewish values should come first. This is a very strong narrative. The other camp, 5 parties, had only one single narrative, all but Netanyahu. And it's not enough to win the elections. So on logistics, Netanyahu worked very hard to unite his 4 parties camp, telling a very emotional story, narrative of being more or promoting more Jewish values, when the other camp was dealing with the question of how do we fight against Mr. Netanyahu, but not trying to bring to the Israeli constituency any hope on any field, not on the terms of economy, society, peace and war, nothing, all but Netanyahu. We should be in power, so Mr. Netanyahu will be out of power. It's not enough to win the elections. So Mr. Netanyahu won, I would say, on a landslide, 64 seats out of 120. He can form a right-wing, ultra-Orthodox coalition right-wing, ultra-Orthodox, the rightist government Israel ever had. If you take the rightist shift towards in Israel, plus the logistics, plus the narrative, you get the landslide of 64 seats out of 120 with a stable government, possibly for the next 4 years. That's my analysis.
Now, there's also, I want to add what Yaron said, looking at the younger crowd who was, first of all, voted for the first time. Well, in the past 3.5 years, more and more people were added into the voting pool, but the against Netanyahu camp also lost in two other aspects. One, they made it, of course, it's Netanyahu or nothing. If you would notice, Netanyahu was also smart enough to let or put aside the trial that's going on against him. And, the camp that was running against him wasn't even able to raise that question. That's one. Two, most of the Israeli, youngsters, let's say 25 or 17, 18 to 25, maybe 30, they do not remember any other prime minister other than Netanyahu. That's the one they grew up with. That's the one they know. Short-term memory and long-term memory don't play in the political game. And most of the youngsters, and you can see also the soldiers of the military, voted for the right wing, either Netanyahu or Ben Gvir and Smotrich, because they felt, they've been fed up in the last two years, like Yaron said, from the uprising in the Arab society, the Palestinian society, and saying, we fear for our security. We understand the language of, we need to put a stop to it, and this is what we believe in. Not even looking at, like Yaron said, at the history and the moves that pushed us into the last 5 elections in 3.5 years. So that's also something that in that battle between yes Netanyahu, no Netanyahu, somewhere got, kind of missed along the lines.
So I want to touch upon that a little bit. First off, thank you. That was an amazing overview. And you touched upon kind of these inner city uprisings that have been going on in the last year. And I think from a kind of a more diasporic perspective, we saw Naftali Bennett on the world stage, at the climate conference in Glasgow, connecting back and forth in the early days of the Ukraine war, between the prime ministers, coming to the United States, connecting with, North American Jewry. That's what was being reported upon. But how much outside of Israel was it being reported upon on these small security issues? A gunman here, 1 or 2 people killed, a gunman there, 1 or 2 people killed. It didn't get to the level of, 8 or 9, but there were these small incidences that were happening this past year. How much did that play into it? And did the Israeli public not really care what Naftali Bennett was doing outside of Israel?
Well, Naftali Bennett, I think, did a very good job as a prime minister, and a very bad job in terms of politics. Because it's not enough to be a good prime minister. You have to keep your party united and not falling apart. Now, the government came into power on the ground of all but Netanyahu, but it did a few major important things, like passing the budget after 3 years with no budget, for instance. Also, making a decision of the COVID-19 booster shot before any other government in the world, including before the Biden administration and the American FDA, which is a bold decision to make a decision to go into the booster shot before the FDA. And the Bennett government made this decision, also made a decision that there will be no more lockdowns. All the coffee shops and the gyms and schools will be open. Cinema theaters and other places, public swimming pools will be open, and the responsibility for the health will be on the citizens mainly. The government will provide vaccinations, will provide tests, masks, and will ask the public to keep a social distance. But if the public do not obey, you will be sick, and the hospitals are open to treat you. But you have to take responsibility, which is very interesting. It didn't happen in Canada, for instance. All the provinces took and said, we will take care of you, citizens. So we will go immediately for a lockdown in all the swimming pools, all the gyms, restaurants, schools, and etc. So the government did a few good things, but you have to keep your coalition. And the coalition was a very narrow coalition. It won 60 against 59 on the confidence vote when it was formed, even not 61, because they had one absentee vote. So 60 against 59, it's a majority, but then you have all the time, be careful and alert and keep your coalition, because it's a very fragile coalition. The problem with Mr. Bennett was that he didn't provide his own party any incentives to keep the government alive. So his own party of 7 seats was falling apart, and he was left behind with only 4. 3 moved to support Mr. Netanyahu as the leader of the opposition. So he had no chance to survive. Once you lose the majority in the parliamentary system and you have a non-confident vote, he had no choice but to initiate the early elections himself, and not trying to give Mr. Netanyahu the pleasure of bringing this government down. So being a prime minister, and a good prime minister, an effective prime minister, making good decisions for the sake of Israel, and representing Israel around the world, in different parts of the world, the West, the East, it was important. But if you cannot survive politically, you go home. And the fact that Mr. Bennett is not a player in this elections right now, it says all by what's the lesson of being a politician. Netanyahu plays politics much, much better than any other player in the Israeli political arena. That's part of the answer, I think.
That's a pretty full answer. I have nothing to add to that.
So let's go on this. We've had 5 elections in the last few years.
3.5 years.
3.5 years. And you said something that was quite startling, because I think the joke was, okay, yes, it's a 64, right, extreme right of center coalition, but don't worry, there's going to be another election in 8 months. But you said this could last a number of years. Why do you think this coalition could last and other coalitions were unable to last?
First of all, if you look at the other 4 elections, the numbers are fairly the same. I mean, like Yaron mentioned, the political move that Bibi made this time ensured him, and you say by a landslide. Why? Because it's all right wing. The coalition now, forming coalition, is not dependable on, left wing or other agreements with, parts that don't believe in a right wing Orthodox government. Now, the secret in ruling in Israel is you have to have a stable coalition, and you have to rule for the next 4 years. Now, if we're looking at it this way, if they will pass a budget, and if the agreements between the coalition will serve everyone, they will win every vote, and there is really no need to disassemble that coalition. Now, listen, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years and what the resolution is going to be, and if someone's going to pass a law that the other partners in Bibi's coalition, is going to close the party. But as it seems right now, they're all going to get what they're wishing for, what they're looking for. And in Israeli politics, all you got to do is, you have 61 votes against 59, and that's it. You win. You don't need anything more than that. And also, if you kind of analyze the camps, we don't really see anyone in the opposition that either will defect into the coalition or vice versa. I don't see someone from let's say Shas going and voting along with Lapid or with Labor Party or with Gantz, because it never happened before, and it's not going to start happening now. So this is why I think we're looking at it and we think that it's a landslide. 64 means the majority. And if they'll pass the laws that they would like to pass right now, like the budget, they'll have stability and they'll be able to rule for the next 4 years, which is, in a way, it's not a bad thing that we will have a stable government for the next 4 years. The elections has cost us a lot of money. We're talking billions of shekels in the last 3.5 years. It's taken its toll on Israel economy. We, as the citizens of Israel who pay taxes, we feel that burden. We hope they will stop spending on elections over and over again, and at least we'll have stability. That's what he's planning
on.
But
the question obviously is how Israel, if at all, is going to be changed in the matter of the foreign relationship. I think Mr. Netanyahu will be responsible for the foreign relationship of Israel with other countries, mainly with the Biden administration. And I don't think he has any intention for another fight with the Democratic administration, as he did with President Clinton and President Obama. And also the question of relationship between religion and state. How will the ultra-Orthodox might want to change Israel and Israeli laws? In that term, I think Mr. Netanyahu will try to hold the reins on his partners and use the brake all the time. If he's the driver, to use the brake and not the gas. Mr. Netanyahu is a very experienced prime minister, and he knows the status of Israel among the nations and among the jury, the worldwide jury. North America is the largest, the US, and then France, Canada, UK. And I don't think he wants to see Israel going backwards. I mean, Israel is a flourish Jewish center, and it's very accepted around the world nations. Mr. Netanyahu, before he left, signed the Abraham Accord, which is a strategic change in the region. 4 Muslim countries signed a peace treaty with Israel without focusing on the Palestinian question, or it was unconditional. And I think his aim will be to bring Saudi Arabia on board. I don't know if you know, but Israeli airline El Al is now free to fly over Saudi Arabia on the way to the Far East from Tel Aviv, something which we couldn't imagine 10 years ago. So the next step will be signing a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia. Israel and Saudi Arabia do have a common enemy as the Shia Iranian state. So I think when it comes to a question of religion and state, Mr. Netanyahu will do his best to keep the situation as it is, the status quo. It's a big question how much pressure the ultra-Orthodox parties will put on Mr. Netanyahu to change the situation, and how much power will he have to stop them. I don't know yet, but it's quite clear that they have no alternative leadership but Mr. Netanyahu, and this is his power in his camp. So they know that if they are not happy and they turn the government down for a reason, the next prime minister they are going to vote for, it will be Mr. Netanyahu. So it's a big question, but I think Mr. Netanyahu knows exactly what kind of damage changes could bring to the status of Israel among nations and to the Jewish community around the world, mainly in the US.
So that gives me a little bit of hope, but I want to push you a bit. And again, it's different when you read American press versus Israeli press, or Israeli press that's translated into English. And again, we all know you say stuff in campaigns, you act differently when you govern. But we've already seen so far, one of the individuals from the coalition saying that he hopes to get rid of the Pride parade in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Ben Gvir has already come out saying, he's really against reform and conservative Judaism and doesn't recognize that. How much of that is, bluster just to try and, get some headlines, or how much of that is going to be a part of their agenda when they govern?
In Israel, there is a gap between rhetoric and activities.
And it's a pretty big gap. It depends on the party, but yeah.
Not only in a campaign. If you look backwards to the rhetoric of Mr. Netanyahu against Iran, you might have thought that Israel already attacked Iran a couple of times. I mean, at least 5 times, according to the rhetoric. At the Congress, it's momentarily till the aircraft are on the way. What happened on the ground? There is a gap between rhetoric, also by Mr. Netanyahu. Rhetoric is high, activities sometimes are very low. That's the Israeli politics, Mr. Netanyahu and others. So as you quoted, they said, they need to say for their own constituency, to be very, I would say, very vocal and very loud declarations. Let's see what the activities are on the ground. If it's not just to feed the public with declarations, doing very little on the ground. It's a possibility. Not that I'm saying nothing is going to happen, but there is a gap between rhetoric and activities.
And plus, Israeli politics is not a one-man show. And I'm not referring to Netanyahu now, but playing the game, and I assume that you're aiming for Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and we know their statements and we know their activity in the past years. But things look very different once you are a member of the parliament, and of course, once you are a minister. It's very easy, to stand and in front of a microphone and state, like Yaron said, for your constituents, but then once the push comes to shove and you actually have to do some things, it's not that easy. Plus, I would remind you that even the Likud party, there are some members of the LGBTQ community. So it's not going to...
The parades will continue. I can sign a check. All the LGBT continue all over Israel, for instance.
Yay.
So these words are just empty words.
And I think Bibi also said it, that he's not gonna, I think he said it last week or so, that he's not gonna intervene, and is not gonna, it's part of Israel. And it's part of the Israeli identity, it's part of the Jewish identity. Statements, yes, of course there'll be statements. Civilians in Israel who are going to go to those raids and have a demonstration. Okay, they've done it before, they'll do it again, just like anywhere else in the world. And people are allowed to think in a very different way. But I do think, and trying to look at things, and even if we're not happy with the results of the elections, but this is democracy, I think we're given a chance here. I think we're given a chance to open up in conversation. I think we're given a chance, to make our way into talking to the leaders of those communities. We might have not had a chance to do that before because they wouldn't be in power. Now that they're in power, let's try to have a conversation. Let's try to explain where we're coming from. Let's try to, and not even trying to get something out of the conversation, just trying to get to know them, trying for them to get to know us. It can be a very very good opportunity to start a new conversation, since now they're in power. It's a possibility.
By the way, the Jewish Agency had delegations from the ultra-Orthodox and Zionist Orthodox members of parliament to American Jewish communities in the last 5-6 years before this coalition is formed, to let them to get to know other parts of the Judaism, other the denominations of the Judaism, because as you know, in Israel we have mostly the Orthodox way, but the Jewish Agency which represent the jury in Israel. Our Secretary General thought it's important that even the Orthodox will get to know the reforms, the conservative, which is the vast majority of the American Jews, and they met them to talk and to get a better understanding. And I think one of Ben Gvir's party leader, Mr. Smotrich, was going to be had 5 years ago a very fruitful visit with the conservatives and the reform, and he has much more knowledge about than before, and I'm sure we will see it in the future when he becomes a minister.
Yeah, Bezalel Smotrich visited Los Angeles several years ago. He met with leaders in the Jewish community, of course, leaders also from the Jewish Agency, and he learned firsthand experience for the first time with the Jewish Agency. How does it look to be, a Jewish family living in the United States, not in the Orthodox way? And actually, he had very interesting conversation, and he made some very good friends from the Jewish community in Los Angeles, from the Reformed Jewish community in Los Angeles. And I can't say that he had an epiphany and that right now he changed his view on things, but he stated that, he understands it more, he respects it, and he understands that, we're the same people and we have to have a conversation. He doesn't, of course, he said he doesn't agree with 100% of the things, but he understands it and he's willing to have a conversation. Listen, I think it's a situation that 10, 15, 20 years ago would have not been possible. And we need to take advantage of it right now. This is our job.
So I love this. And also I love what you said that the stability is a good thing, because we haven't had stability in the last number of years. Now let's look to the future a bit. As you said, for many of the young voters in Israel, all they've known is Netanyahu. Who's next?
Depends in which camp. In the Likud, look, as I said, the public opinion shifted to the right. So we can assume that if there is no major change, it's going to be someone from the right. Now, Netanyahu made it clear that as long as he's in power, he doesn't want to see any successor around. So all the potential future leaders were either kicked out of the party or suffered a major setback in the party. So he likes to cut the grass when the grass grows a little bit. So we cannot tell you who's going to take place after Mr. Netanyahu, but I can assure you that Mr. Netanyahu has no intention to retire soon. And how do I know that? Because none of his predecessors ever had any intention to leave. Unlike the US Constitution that you can serve 2 terms, Israel as a parliamentary system has no limit as long as the parliament gives a confidence vote. And if we look back to the 13 predecessors of Mr. Netanyahu, none of them had any intention to leave. Mr. Ben-Gurion, who is the founding father of the nation, wanted to come back and lost elections with 4 seats at the end. And Golda Meir had to resign due to the Yom Kippur War. Mr. Levi Eshkol died. Mr. Sharon got a stroke. Mr. Rabin was assassinated. Mr. Peres lost the elections. Mr. Shamir lost the elections. Mr. Begin had to retire due to the Lebanon War. Mr. Olmert went to trial due to corruption. None of them had any intention to say, I've done what I thought I should do, and it's time for my best successor to take over, to promote Israel towards a safe haven. No, they all believed that no one can do a better job than themselves. and Mr. Netanyahu is not different than the others. So as long as he's healthy, he will try to keep in power. He's in a good shape. He celebrated his 73 birthday last month, and his father passed away at the age of 102. It means it's possibly of 29 more years of Mr. Netanyahu. You can think where you will be in 29 years. Mr. Netanyahu might be still in power.
So
I'm happy I make you laugh.
No. This is good to hear. I have 1,000 more questions, but A, it's getting late. B, I do not want to prevent other people from asking their questions. So I am going to invite Rabbi Sunez and Nanis to come back to our screen and really open it up for our last 10 minutes for some of our public questions.
So if everybody would turn on their camera now, and Mariana, let's go into the group, the gallery mode. And we can go to our own gallery mode, I guess. Turn it into a gallery. And if you have questions, I'm going to call on people, but let's get everybody on. Or if you don't feel like, appearing, if you want to put it in the chat, I can read your question. And let's make it not statements, but questions. We don't want to, we're here to learn, not to hear from anyone else. I mean, there are a lot more people, but they're not showing themselves. Okay, Donna, you have a question.
Yes, I want to thank everyone for coming, Rabbi Simonds, and I'm looking how to pronounce your name, Nadav Elyoni, Mr. Elyoni.
Nadav and Yaron, yes.
Both of you gentlemen. I have a question about the safety of everyone. I know you have the dome there. Thank God we do in Israel. But I'm concerned about people getting killed. And I want to know what we're going to do. I'd be willing to do a concert to raise the money.
No, you're not talking about that. You have a question?
But I want to, yes, I do. What are you doing now in the government to protect with surveillance to catch terrorists, to find them before they strike?
You mean Arab terrorists?
To catch them, to stop them before they.
Well, I think they have pretty strong security, and they're always on the alert. So I don't think things are going to change. I mean, I think they're.
I want that to continue, ma'am.
I'm sure.
He was talking about. Elyoni was talking. Mr. Elyoni was talking about someone getting shot over here and then they're over here.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I'll answer it, and really enough. The election's not going to affect that. I think it's actually going to make it even more strict in a way. The security services in Israel will always continue to monitor and stop anyone from hurting any other, civilian in the state of Israel or tourists or anyone who's innocent, of course. That's not good.
We have a question. Thank you. Is there any chance of Gantz joining Netanyahu's coalition is a question.
Well, he did. Mr. Gantz is the Minister of Defense from the Central Party. He did it once and it didn't do any good to his political status. So I doubt if he does it again. I think he wants to build himself as the future prime minister from the center or center-right, and joining Mr. Netanyahu into an extreme right-wing government. And it's going to be an extreme right-wing government. Even Mr. Gantz joining the government, because the National Right Zionist Party will be part of the coalition. So I can't see why Mr. Gantz will, I'm sure that Mr. Netanyahu would love to have a centric party in his cabinet, if we look at the record in the past. But I don't think it's going to happen this time.
There's a question, what was the count of the party numbers? So there were 64 for Netanyahu's coalition, and Likud and Lapid, what did they have? Do you know?
Likud has 32 seats and Lapid has 24. It's the central party. Lapid is the outgoing prime minister right now. He used to be a TV show person. 24 and 32. And Mr. Netanyahu's bloc is 4 parties, altogether 64 out of the 120. It's a clear majority which will help him forming a government pretty soon. He has, according to the Israeli law, 28 days, which was a month. So he got the mandate on Sunday, actually 4 weeks to form a government. There is no reason why he can't make it on
So I
time.
have a question. Do you think they will overturn the grandchild clause in the law of return, which will directly affect secular and progressive Jews and converts?
Good
question.
We don't know. We actually had a conversation about this morning. We're pretty sure that the Orthodox are already pushing very hard on that. Chances are they're gonna, pitch for that. We simply don't know. First of all, they need to have the law that makes, the government. I don't know how you call it in English. It's got the
It's the
it's the law that enables the parliament to basically, if the Supreme Court cancels a law, then the parliament can basically overturn that their call. I don't know. I simply don't know how you call it in English. So they have to pass that first, and if they pass it, maybe they will go to the grandchild resolution. Too early in the game to know. I mean, whatever we'll say, it's an assumption based on nothing. So the answer or not,
No.
we don't know.
Sue Casa. Yeah.
I'm a little bit more hopeful after hearing your remarks, and I thank you for them. My concern is I've heard very, very negative things about Ben Gvir, and it seems in this country we have a situation, the US, where the minority can control the majority because of our electoral system with red states, blue states. And in Israel, it looks like you have this Ben Gvir who, the little I know of him, he's very extreme. He can control the country because he can say to Bibi, I'm out of here. You don't do this, I'm out of here. So can you speak a little bit about this? This is a real concern to me.
Sure. I'll look. First of all, there are many Israelis who are also very concerned. I'd like to be honest and frank. And there are many Israelis who feel like you. I mean, maybe half of the population who didn't vote for this coalition is troubled and concerned. But I will say a few things that I personally believe in and see it as a past political commentator. First, I think Mr. Ben Gvir, as a minister, would love to show those who didn't vote for him that he can be much more moderate than he is. I think so. Why? Because his supporters will not leave him. The only chance to get some more support and be more popular is by easing the tense and saying, yeah, I was an extremist, but as a minister, I'm not as I was. That's A. B, you are right that he can blackmail the prime minister. According to the Israeli system, a small party can blackmail the majority, the biggest party in the coalition. But let's say that Mr. Netanyahu says, enough is enough. I'm not going to be blackmailed anymore. We'll go for next. I'm dismissing the parliament and we'll go for early elections in 2 years. What's the alternative of Mr. Ben Gvir? His alternative is Mr. Netanyahu back, and he will be extremely popular to be the reason for this government to be torn down. So in this political checks and balances, he has a good reason to be concerned not to lose where he is if he tries to, how do you say it?
To pull the rope, to basically
pull the rope too strongly till it's
Okay.
so I'm sorry. So I think he got a great victory in his eyes, and it could flip if he plays with it too much and too big. like kids who take their candies in the plate and they don't know when to stop till they vomit. So it's the same, exactly the same in politics. Sometimes you have to know where to stop, because if you don't stop on time, your constituency might vomit, and you don't want it to happen. I hope-
Somebody asked, what happens if Bibi can't put together a coalition? Do you think
Can't?
If
He
he
cannot.
can't, so if any prime minister, this is not Bibi. So if a prime minister in after they got the mandate from the president cannot put a coalition together, they can ask for another 14 days, and after they can go also. If they still can form a coalition, the president basically appoints the next in line, which will be Lapid. And if Lapid can do it in 21 days, we go for re-election. And this is exactly what happened. Not the last election, the election before.
Before we go to elections, if two candidates cannot make it, the president forward the mandate to the Israeli parliament, to the Knesset, for 3 weeks, saying, I couldn't make it. Now you, the members of parliament, the elected body of the Israeli democracy, you have 3 weeks to form a government before you're going to be dissolved. And many of you might not come back. So you think seriously about that, because if you go to elections, you might stay at home forever. If you have a government, please form it. If not, in 21 days, there is a 6th round. But
it happened not in the fourth
Yes.
election, the third election.
But as we see it now, Mr. Netanyahu will form a government of
For sure.
64. Yeah.
so? I have a question. Do you think that this government, what will the relations, or I don't even know how to say, not treatment, but back and forth between the Israeli Arabs in the country and the Palestinians in the West Bank, is that going to change? Is it going to get worse? Is there any hope for any kind of
First of all, let's
cold peace even?
wait, let's differ. The Palestinians in the West Bank are not the citizens of the state of Israel. They are not part of the elections. They are like the citizens of any other country in the world. They do not take part in the elections.
No, I know that.
No, I'm explaining to
Oh,
the crowd.
Right.
The Israeli Arabs are, and by the way, some of them voted Likud. Some of them voted for Bibi. Israeli Arabs are, citizens of the state of Israel, just like Yaron and I. Some of them, Muslims or Christians, it doesn't matter. Serve in the military, hold positions like judges and then bank managers. So they are full citizens of the state of Israel. What the relationship will be with Netanyahu's government towards the Arab citizens of the state of Israel, it's a good question, because his ballot was, he was running on, and like Ben Gvir was running on, I'm going to take care of the crime in the Arab society. I'm going to take care of the uprisings in the Arab society and small communities, especially in the South. I think that even like Yaron said, rhetoric is very different than actions. I think that Bibi is going to do just like what he did before. He's going to try to have a conversation. He's going to have to try to, ease with them, to deal with them, and basically treat the problems in the Arab-Israeli society. We have crime problem in the Israeli Arab society. We need more police officers. We need more, courts. We need more judges. We need more lawyers to deal with those problems. So these are problems that Israeli society has already. I don't know yet, since we don't know, who's going to be in power in what office. I don't think that the approach to Israeli Arabs is going to change than what we've seen before. They're not going to go and arrest Arabs in the middle of the street. Absolutely not. This is not going to happen. It's not like that. But we'll have to wait. Who's going to be in what office? And I hope that now, when they're, as Bibi wanted to form an extreme right coalition in the government, they'll have to deal with real issues, real problems. in the Arab-Israeli society, there's a lot of crime. We need to deal with it for their sake, for our sake, for a safe society in Israel. And a lot of the Arabs, as you can see in the elections, did not vote, one, or did not vote for Arab parties. You see, they're out of the Knesset. They simply did not vote for their representatives because they didn't believe in their way. And Israeli Arabs actually believe that their parties are representing Palestinian Arabs and not Israeli Arabs. And this is why they not vote them into the parliament. So you have one party who's totally out and the other parties are almost out. They really lost a lot of their power.
And about Palestinians?
I don't think there's going to be any change with the Palestinians.
Same thing.
In the last government didn't resume any negotiation with the Palestinians, and the last prime minister who had a very generous proposal to the Palestinians was Mr. Olmert, and they never came back with an answer. So yeah, and Olmert was Barak before him in Camp David with President Clinton and Yasser Arafat, and I think the Palestinians caused their own camp a major setback by not trying to, making the most of the two prime ministers who were ready to make a progress, Prime Minister Barak and Prime Minister Olmert. In the last 13 years under Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Lapid and Mr. Bennett, this track was in a deadlock, and I don't think it's going to change in the near future. Unfortunately, that's the situation.
Well, I know it's late in New York. It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And Yaron just came from Israel, so he's exhausted. We want to thank you so much for this update for both of you, for Yaron and Nadav. We really appreciate it. Joel, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And,
you.
Thank you for having us.
B'hatzlacha and everything. And of course, Nadav, we'll be seeing you with more programming. I know you're going to bring stuff to about Israel to Wilshire Boulevard Temple, and we're looking forward to that. So,
Absolutely.
Rabbi, may I tell the gentleman something? Thank you so much for what you're doing. My heart breaks that there's no peace. I think in theater.
okay, that's it. So we're done.
Okay, I love you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you, gentlemen. God bless you.
Bye.
Be safe.